Yosemite, a wilderness older than memory. Its granite walls, its endless silence, they've swallowed more than beauty. In October 2003, it swallowed Emily Hart. She was 32, a backcountry ranger, fearless and meticulous. On a quiet morning, she saddled her horse, Shadow, and rode into the forest. She didn't come back. 5 years later, her horse's remains were found, but not where anyone could explain. And the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. This isn't just a story about a disappearance. It's about what the forest keeps and what it gives back. October 12, 2003. Emily left Wawona Station at 7:42 a.m. Her patrol route was familiar. From the station through Alder Creek, up to Chilnwalna Falls and back before sundown. She checked her gear twice, radioed in, and, like always, patted Shadow's neck before she rode out. Witnesses remember her smiling. But Yosemite has a way of turning routine into something else. At 11:17 a.m., her last radio call came through. Approaching the South Ridge. No issues. Weather clear. Then silence. By 7 p.m., Emily hadn't returned. By 8, the search began. More than 30 rangers joined the search. Helicopters combed the skies. Dogs tracked the trails. Every path, every ridge, every clearing swept over and over. For 5 days, nothing. No signs of a fall. No horse tracks. No torn brush. And then, the prints. Shadow's hoof prints. Perfectly clear, leading into the pines. And then, they just stopped. No drag marks. No broken branches. No indication horse or rider had even turned around. Just gone. The old rangers whispered about it. They called it the Silent Pass, an area the maps don't mark. They say compasses spin there. They say you can hear the wind hum. Emily was never found. And for 5 years, the case went cold. Daniel Hart, Emily's younger brother. He was 27 when she vanished. He never stopped looking. He pored over ranger reports, hiked the same trails she rode. He spoke to the men and women who'd searched for her. But every lead ended in the same silence Yosemite is famous for. Until 2008. A hiker, an off-duty firefighter, was bushwhacking through an unmarked area for miles from any trail. He smelled it first, and then he saw the bones. Shadow, her saddle weathered and cracked, still strapped in place. No broken bones, no signs of a fall, and next to it, a scrap of green fabric. Ranger issue. Daniel drove through the night. When he reached the site, he stared down at the remains of his sister's horse and swore he could feel the hum in his teeth. Daniel came back with 2 rangers, Strauss and Torres. They weren't supposed to be there. No official search. Just a brother, begging for one last chance to find her. For 3 days, they pushed deep into the backcountry. No trails, no markers. And then, the hum. First, faint. But the deeper they went, the louder it became. And in a clearing, they saw it. Stones, arranged in a circle, scratched into each 11 marks. Torres counted them twice. 11. Strauss said nothing. And then Daniel saw it. Hoof prints. Fresh. They followed the prints into the trees. And there, they found a cavern. At its mouth, a smell of earth and rot. Inside, they would find bones. And the first proof that Emily Hart had been right to be afraid. This was only the beginning. Daniel and 2 rangers have found something else. The cavern. The hum. Louder than ever. And inside, the forest's first secret. They stood at the entrance for a long time. Torres said it smelled wrong. Like wet stone and iron. Strauss didn't speak. Daniel just stared into the dark, gripping the handle of his sister's old hunting knife like it was an anchor. And then, they went in. The cavern was narrow, its walls jagged and sharp. The deeper they went, the stranger it felt. Their radios crackled, static, even though there was no signal. And the hum, it wasn't just sound anymore. You could feel it in your chest. Then Torres saw it. The bones. Hundreds of them. Deer, bears, smaller animals. stacked in deliberate spirals. At the center of the largest spiral, a single green ranger's badge. Pause. Soft hum spikes higher. Emily's badge. They didn't stay long. Daniel took the badge. Torres snapped photos. And when they returned to Wawona, they filed a report. But 2 days later, the report disappeared. And with it, so did Torres' photographs. You didn't see what you think you saw, Strauss was told. This is over. But Daniel didn't stop. That night, he broke into Emily's cabin. Her old ranger quarters, sealed since 2003. And in a drawer, he found it. A map, hand-drawn, not official issue, and marked with red ink. In Emily's handwriting, one word, pass. Daniel convinced Torres to go back with him. Strauss refused. Some things don't want to be found, was all he said. But Daniel didn't care. He followed Emily's map into a part of Yosemite that, on paper, didn't exist. And as they hiked, the hum returned. At 7 p.m., they reached a narrow ridge. Torres said it felt like they'd been walking in circles, but Daniel knew better. He pointed to the ground. Fresh hoofprints, leading to a tree line, and carved into one of the trunks. 11 marks, same as the stones. Daniel whispered, "She was here." They made camp on the ridge, but Torres didn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., he woke Daniel. "Listen," he said. At first, there was only wind, and then a second sound. Hoofbeats, slow, heavy. But when they shined their lights, nothing, just trees. Then, from the darkness, a figure, not human, not entirely. It stood just far enough away that its edges blurred in the mist. Torres raised his flashlight, and it was gone. No sound, only the hum. Daniel said they weren't alone, and Torres believed him. The next day, they pressed on. They found a clearing hidden, sunless, and there, half buried in the earth, Emily's notebook. Its pages were damp, warped with age. The last entry read, "If you hear the hum, don't follow it. But if you can't help yourself, count the stones. 11. Always 11. Below it, 3 words scratched so deep they tore the paper. "IT watches still." Daniel didn't know it then, but the forest wasn't done with him. Not by a long shot. Bones in spirals. A map that shouldn't exist. And a brother walking the same path his sister did. Toward something the forest has been guarding for years. Daniel's heart was getting closer. And that's when Yosemite started looking back. Daniel and Torres will cross a line that should never be crossed. And once they do, Yosemite will stop watching. It will start moving. They hiked for hours, Emily's map leading them higher into the Sierra wilderness. No official trail, no signs, only the red markings on the map, and 11 carved symbols scratched into the trees, like breadcrumbs left for the lost. Torres muttered, "This isn't just wilderness anymore. This feels wrong." Daniel didn't answer. He only gripped Emily's notebook tighter. Then the trees stopped. The forest simply ended. Ahead of them stretched a narrow ravine, walls sheer, jagged like teeth, and painted in faded red across the stone. An ancient spiral. They had reached it. The pass. Inside the ravine, the air changed. No wind, no birds, just the hum. The ground was littered with stones, arranged in circles 11 at a time, and scattered among them, bones, animal bones, human bones, old, bleached by time, and newer ones still holding scraps of faded fabric. Torres whispered, "God, how many?" Daniel didn't count. He was staring at one thing only, a ranger's hat, torn and matted with dirt, pinned beneath a stone at the center of the largest spiral. He picked it up. Inside, stitched in frayed thread, E. Heart. They camped inside the ravine that night. Daniel couldn't stop reading Emily's notebook. Near the back, he found a page he hadn't noticed before. "If you find the spirals, do not break them. They are not graves. They are warnings." And below it, another line, scribbled, almost frantic, "It waits between the stones." Torres asked what it meant. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. Because just then, they heard it. A low, deliberate hoofbeat. They followed the sound, flashlights cutting through the black. At the far end of the ravine, a shadow stood between the stones. Not a person, not entirely an animal. The shape bent wrong, like it didn't fit inside its own skin. And when the light hit it, it vanished. The hum stopped, just silence, until something whispered, clear as a voice right beside Daniel's ear. 11. Torres grabbed him. We're leaving. Now. But Daniel didn't move, because in that silence, he swore he heard Emily's voice, calling his name. They should have run. Instead, Daniel pushed deeper, following a narrow fissure at the ravine's edge. The walls closed in. Torres cursed under his breath, but followed anyway. And then, they found it. Tunnel. Its walls etched with spirals, hundreds of them. And on the ground, a trail of hoofprints. Fresh. They descended into the dark. And that's when Daniel saw it. A single lantern, still burning, impossibly old, and hanging from it, Emily's knife. The past had secrets, and now Daniel was standing in the middle of one. The spirals were not graves. They were barriers, and breaking them was never supposed to happen. But Daniel Hart had already stepped inside. Daniel will discover the truth that no search team ever found. And in the silence of that cave, he will learn what the forest takes and what it leaves behind. They followed the hoofprints. Downward. The deeper they went, the tighter the tunnel became, stone closing in like clenched fists. And on the walls, spirals. Dozens of them, some drawn with paint, others scratched into the rock by hand. Torres muttered, "This isn't natural. This is..." But Daniel cut him off. She was here. She had to be. He wasn't talking to Torres. He was talking to the hum. Because down here, it was louder, almost like it was answering him. Then, they found a chamber, a hollow room of stone perfectly round, its floor covered in bones. And in the center, an altar. On that altar, Emily's badge, pinned to the stone with a rusted hunting knife. Daniel picked it up with trembling hands. And beneath it, another note. Emily's handwriting. "Daniel, if you're here, I'm sorry. Don't follow me. If you break the spirals, it will hear you." And at the bottom, barely legible, "It is not a thing. It is the forest." Torres whispered, "What the hell does that mean?" But Daniel, hearing his sister's words scratched into that paper, just stared into the dark. And that's when he saw it. A shadow moved between the stones. Not human, not animal. A shape vast, shifting, like a body made of branches and antlers and bone. It didn't walk. It bent. Daniel didn't run. He stepped closer. And the hum stopped. It stood before him, an absence in the shape of a thing. Its antlers scraping the stone ceiling. Its face, nothing but shadow. And then it spoke. Not in words, but in his bones. 11. Daniel's voice cracked. "Emily. Where is she?" The thing leaned closer. 1 for 11. Always 1 for 11. Torres grabbed him. "We need to leave. Now." But Daniel couldn't move. He understood. The spirals. The bones. The numbers. Every 11. It took one. One soul for the forest. One to keep the past sealed. And Emily had given herself to keep it closed. The thing tilted its head. It held out a hand or something like a hand. And in its grip, a lantern. Emily's lantern. The message was clear. Take it and stay. Replace her. Or leave and let the pass open again. Torres shouted, "Daniel, we're not dying down here." But Daniel, his hand was already outstretched. He could hear her voice, Emily, calling him by name. And then, he closed his fist around the lantern. The pass roared like a living thing. Torres dragged Daniel backward, screaming at him to move. The spirals on the walls burned. The hum became deafening. And then, everything went dark. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was outside, back in the forest. The ravine was gone. Torres lay beside him, barely conscious. And in Daniel's hand, the lantern, still burning. Emily's voice was gone, but he knew the truth. She hadn't vanished. She had stayed behind. And now, so had he. Yosemite has rules, and Daniel Hart had just taken his sister's place. But the forest doesn't forget, and neither will it stop watching. They found them at dawn, 2 men, mud-stained, half-conscious, emerging from a stretch of forest no map acknowledged. The rescue team didn't ask questions. They should have. Daniel didn't speak. Not when they checked his wounds. Not when they asked about Emily. Not even when Torres, trembling, muttered, "We didn't come back alone." They took them to the ranger station. And that's where Daniel realized something. The lantern, the one he carried from the pass, it was still burning, and no one else could see it. Daniel went home, a small cabin far from town, the kind of place where silence had weight. But the hum followed him. It was faint at first, like wind through the walls. Then, the spirals began. On his window, in the frost on the glass, on the inside of his bedroom door. Always the same, always 11 turns. He stopped sleeping. Torres called him every night, asking the same question. "You hear it too, don't you?" And Daniel would lie. No, but they both knew the truth. 3 weeks later, 2 federal investigators came knocking. They had questions about Yosemite, about the caves, about why a ranger, missing for 5 years, was now being written off as a closed case. Daniel didn't answer, but one of them, Agent Hale, noticed the spirals. On the doorframe behind him. She didn't ask. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she said, "Mr. Hart, if the lantern's still burning, don't let it go out." And then she left. Torres called that night, panicked. They know. They've always known. The spirals didn't stay in the cabin. They began to appear in town. Carved into trees behind the grocery store. Etched into the glass at the sheriff's office. Even the river stones bore them. Like they'd always been there. And people noticed. One hiker went missing. Then another. Torres stopped answering his phone. And the hum, it wasn't just in the woods anymore. It was in the air. Everywhere. Daniel didn't know what scared him more. That it was spreading, or that a part of him no longer wanted it to stop. One night, there was a knock at the door. Daniel opened it. No one was there, but on the porch, a single scrap of paper. Emily's handwriting. "You took my place. Do not let the fire die. If it goes out, it will open." And beneath it, a single spiral. 11 turns. He looked out into the trees, and for just a second, he saw her, standing at the tree line, her ranger uniform torn, her face pale as bone. And then, she was gone. Daniel lit another lantern, and he hasn't let it go out since. Yosemite doesn't take, it trades, and Daniel Hart is the forest's newest keeper. He hurled the lantern into the pass. For a moment, nothing, and then the spirals burned out, one by one. The hum fell silent, and the crack in the earth closed. Torres collapsed. Hale didn't move, and Daniel stood there in the dark, staring at the ground where it had been. And for the first time in months, he felt nothing. Not peace, not relief, just empty. They walked back in silence. No hum, no spirals. The forest felt dead. But the next morning, a knock on Daniel's door. He opened it and found another lantern, unlit, and a note in his sister's handwriting. "You can close the pass, but you cannot unmake it. It always finds another way." And far in the trees, the hum began again. Only watched, and Daniel Hart is still watching. Torres left town, packed his things and disappeared into the back roads. No forwarding address, no goodbye, just a voicemail on Daniel's phone. "It's still here, in me. I can feel it counting. Don't wait too long." Daniel played it twice. Then, never again. Emily's old badge was on his table, burned around the edges. He placed it next to the unlit lantern he found on his porch. He hadn't touched it since. But that night, the flame inside it sparked on its own. She didn't knock, just walked into Daniel's cabin with a metal case and a look that said she hadn't slept in days. She opened it and laid out documents, maps, photos, testimonies from as far back as 1932, disappearances, and always the same sign, the spiral. Pause. Hum rises faintly. There's a term the Bureau uses. Unofficial. Off the books. The count. Not a place. Not a creature. A force. It doesn't kill. It exchanges. It waits until someone breaks the spiral. Then it chooses who takes the next turn. Daniel counted the spirals again. He'd marked 11 on the trees behind his cabin. 11 trades. 11 returns. One left. He asked Hale, "What happens if no one takes the 12th flame?" She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Yosemite didn't offer closure. It offered countdowns. Daniel walked into the forest, the lantern in hand, back to where it all began. The ravine, now silent, now still. He placed the 12th flame in the dirt, and for the first time in 6 years, he said goodbye. As he turned to leave, he heard her. "Danny." It wasn't wind. It wasn't memory. It was her voice. Alive, clear, and close. He spun, lantern shaking in his hands, but there was no one there. Only a spiral freshly carved into the earth. 13 turns. Daniel dropped to his knees. The forest had changed its rules. The trade was made, but not with him. Emily Hart stepped from the trees. Whole, alive, older. She looked at him, confused, like someone waking up from a dream. She said one word, "Home." And Daniel, he just nodded. They walked back together. No hum, no spirals, no countdown, just silence and peace. But when Daniel stepped into his cabin, there was another lantern on the table. This one, already burning. Daniel Hart brought his sister back. But the forest doesn't forget. It just waits. It watches. And when the next spiral forms, someone will hear the hum. They always do. If this story moved you, if you believe some mysteries deserve to be remembered, not forgotten, then this is the place for you. We uncover the unheard. We chase the unexplained. And we give voice to the stories buried in silence. Subscribe to Storyline Chronicles and never miss the next truth waiting in the dark.